What an incredible Cinderella story. This unknown comes out of nowhere to lead the pack. At Augusta, he's on his final hole. He's about 455 yards away. He's going to hit about a 2-iron, I think. Well, he got all of that. The crowd is standing on its feet here at Augusta. The normally reserved Augusta crowd going wild. For this young Cinderella who's come out of nowhere, he's got about 350 yards left. He's going to hit about a 5-iron, I expect, don't you think? He's got a beautiful backswing. He got all of that one. He's got to be pleased with that. The crowd is just on its feet here. He's a Cinderella boy. Tears in his eyes, I guess, as he lines up this last shot. He's got about 195 yards left, and looks like he's got about an 8-iron. This crowd has gone deadly silent. Cinderella story, out of nowhere. A former greenskeeper now about to become the Masters champion. It looks like a miracle. It's in the hole! It's in the hole!
Welcome to a special episode of G&T. Today I've got a special guest. His name is Mark Baldwin. He is a professional golfer, and he's got, I think, a pretty interesting story to tell and something that I want people to hear about. And I know that he enjoys talking about his professional career and sort of pursuing a dream that a lot of kids have as far as playing professional sports.
I'm a little disturbed right now. My agent told me that I was going on the Smartless podcast, so I'm confused personally. I thought I had made it, and I had made it out to Smartless, but that seemed like a good fit. But I'm here now, so we might as well go on with G&T. Great, let's roll.
This is the opposite of a smart podcast, in case you had any confusion about that. We have no facts. We don't look up anything. We just sort of free flow and talk, and whatever we say is fact. Fitting
for the times.
Absolutely right. So we've got Mark. Mark, I know you're traveling right now. I assume to play golf. Where are you headed to?
I'm actually heading home, Zane. I'm in the Philadelphia airport right now, heading back to Phoenix, where I live. And I was here playing a little bit of golf. I spent some time with my good friend Ryan French, who started Monday Q Info for the golf followers out there, and Michael Bamberger, one of the most legendary golf writers and really sports writers of the last 30 years. And I was very fortunate. He's a lovely man.
That's all. Yeah, I've read him. I probably read him weekly. He's a great follower, and I wanted to get into Ryan French in a little bit, because that's sort of what brought you and I together, at least in a sort of acquaintance type scenario, I suppose, where I met him initially just through his presence of talking about Monday qualifiers and sort of the minor league tours and smaller tours, and not all the top 50 guys in the world on the PGA Tour. So I want to jump into that later. But I kind of wanted to just start, and I don't want to go all the way back necessarily, just whatever you're comfortable talking about. But I was sort of curious to know, when did you start playing golf, and when did you realize you were better than 99% of the population at playing golf?
I started playing and going to the golf course with my dad when I was quite young. But it was just something that I did with my dad, along with so many other things. I was more just there to drive the cart for probably the first year or two, about, 5 to 6. And then I started actually playing a little more. And then by 8, I actually started entering just some really local junior tournaments, where you'd You'd play a makeshift set of tees, and you might play 6 holes or something like that.
Sure.
And then by 10, I was actually playing state junior tournaments in New Hampshire. I grew up in New Hampshire, small town, Laconia, right on Lake Winnipesaukee. If you've ever seen the movie What About Bob, that's where the movie is set, though they didn't shoot there. On Golden Pond was actually shot on Squam Lake, which is just down the road from where I grew up. Ernest Thompson film, Academy Award winner, if you've ever heard of that. But
I haven't.
Okay. Jane Fonda was at kind of made her, Henry and Jane Fonda. So it was a beautiful place to grow up, and I did a lot of activities and sports with my dad, and golf just happened to emerge as one of the 2 things that I liked the most and that I was the best. So I would say, when did I realize that I loved it, and the improvement was kind of organic, and what I was insanely fortunate for was all the other junior golfers who are around my age in the area that I could go spend summers with from sun up to sundown. We'd have putting contests and chipping contests, and we picked the range. As my first job, we picked the peripheries of the range with shag bags. And then we just have contests all day, and we play, as many holes as we could where we could get out. And so we didn't know it, but we were all this band of brothers improving one another and being competitive. And it was a true godsend for getting better. And so by the time I was 15, I won the state and the New England junior. And it was just so organic, the whole thing. So I never really thought, I don't think I considered college golf much. I certainly thought about professional golf because who doesn't, who doesn't watch golf on TV if you love it and think those guys are gods, they're deities out there. And I would spend, when I wasn't actually at the golf course practicing, I'd be on my front yard practicing with, wiffle balls with my dad. We'd hit them up onto the roof and they'd fall down and we'd catch them. So we'd be working on our outfielding skills and our golf skills, and little cross hybrid training. But it was a fantastic way to learn and improve and develop a love for the game.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I was just kind of curious as well. I've got 7-year-old twin boys, and they're currently playing football. And one of them is, I think, the fastest second grader in Colorado. And he ran for 3 touchdowns yesterday. And so it's one of those things where, at some point you have to get your kids sort of into advanced sports to just see if that's what they want to do. And you kind of get the idea of whether or not they want to play. And of course they want to play now because they want to do everything right now. But no, it's really cool that you got into it. And I think it's just crazy how much better at golf you are than I am and everybody else is.
well, look, I mean, one thing about growing up in the Northeast as a golfer, and there are professional players who have come out of Massachusetts and Rhode Island, but there's never been a professional player who's really made it that's come out of New Hampshire. Keegan Bradley, he's a Vermont guy, Vermont, Massachusetts. So, we were in the same orbit in playing junior tournaments, but he didn't excel and really break out until after college. And so that possibility of excelling, succeeding in professional golf when you grow up in the Northeast isn't really that. It's a dream, but it's not so much of a possibility because so few people have done it from your area. And so you're essentially a big fish in a small pond. And so I won everything around New Hampshire and New England. But then at some point you have to go out and face the rest of the world too. And that's a real wake-up call. I
grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I'm a little bit older than Jordan Spieth is. I used to watch him play in the Byron Nelson when he was still in high school. And so, we had that DFW and then I guess Florida. I mean, those are the 2, probably biggest hotbeds, I guess, of where golfers live. Especially when you're 12, 13, 14 years old, you think you're pretty good at golf and your parents think you're pretty good. Because I know, I think Will Zalatoris grew up in California. And I think when he was a teenager, they moved to Texas to just have better access to play in tournaments throughout the year. I think in Colorado, where I'm at now, I think Wyndham Clark is probably the only, or if not the only, he's probably the best golfer to come from Colorado, just because our seasons are so short here. And it's probably the same in New Hampshire as well, right? Where you only have so many months you can play, as opposed to a place like Florida or Dallas, where you can pretty much play 11 months out of the year. The grass might not be green anymore, but you can still play because it's 65 degrees in December.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a repetition equation, right? Especially when you're young, and so many of the best players come from the Sun Belts, and they just are able to get a lot more swings in throughout the year, so they get better faster. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And if you're a junior player from the Northeast or from the kind of northern part of our country, and then you go to a school with seasons, it puts you at a disadvantage to play after college, right? Now it doesn't mean you can't excel at the professional level, but at some point, most people have to make up those lost reps, and or just be supremely talented.
Yeah, and now obviously with all of the indoor technology and simulators and things, kids that live in areas where it's cold for 4 or 5 months at a time have at least the ability to go in and swing a golf club, even though it's into a screen. And I'm not sure. I know that they say like the TrackMans and things are really good. I've never really enjoyed hitting into those as opposed to hitting out, into the open. You're better than I am, so you might be able to tell me if they do actually work. For me, it seems like they don't work as great as I want them to.
I don't know if you followed all of the coverage that Monday Q had this year of
you played in a tournament, right?
So TrackMan actually sponsored a tour called the Next Tour, and it was the first international simulator golf tour for professionals. And there was one rounders. It was a really cool concept. There was 1,000 players playing in any given event, and it was just a free-for-all. Everybody goes and tries to shoot the lowest score you can. But there's a serious learning curve when you're actually trying to go score your ball rather than just kind of optimize your numbers, look at your carry distance, gain information. That's one great thing about TrackMan. It's one great thing, not just TrackMan, but kind of all launch monitors and simulators is you can get better faster because you have so much access to real-time information. But to actually put together a score and learn how to play, hit short game shots on the simulator is a different animal than doing it on the golf course. And I'm a much better on-course player than I am sim player. That's not the case. It's not the case for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, hitting a 5-iron into a screen is one thing, but hitting a 52-degree wedge into a screen is something entirely different, I feel like. Especially if you're on the green and you even go up and loft to 56 or a lob wedge. I don't feel like it actually responds to what you would see on an actual course. And then obviously you've got the way the grass is lying and things like that, where it's not going to actually translate 100% to and from the screen to playing an actual course.
Right. Yeah. You just have a lot of variables when you're playing golf on a course that you have to read and understand and actually make some sort of come to some sort of conclusion before from that equation before you execute the shot. Very little of that is happening in the simulator.
So other than golf, that's Monday Q. Mark and I have something else in common as well, and that is the University of Notre Dame, where I know you went to college and played golf for their golf team. My question about Notre Dame to you is, were you a Notre Dame fan before you went there, or did they recruit you and you became a Notre Dame fan after the fact?
I actually was never a Notre Dame fan growing up, and I think I sort of had negativity towards them.
Sure.
Just kind of a negative perception towards them. I think it's fair to say that you have Notre Dame create some strong opinions one way or the other. There's not many people who are kind of indifferent towards it. And really had no intention of visiting or going. I took a visit at Purdue. There was a new golf coach at Notre Dame named John Jasinski. And Zane, were you ever a fan of the show Mad Men?
Oh, absolutely. John Hamm. Yep.
Okay, so John Jasinski was Don Draper.
Okay.
I mean, just this big, handsome guy who could sell anything to anyone, just as smooth and smart as they come. And he convinced me to come over after my Purdue visit to see Notre Dame. And we talked for like 5 or 6 hours that first day that I was there. We had a lot of similarities in our upbringing, and in our dads had some similar challenges. And we bonded. And the next day, he had a full scholarship offer for me. And he said, look, I hadn't planned on doing this, but we had such an incredible day yesterday, and I really want you to be a part of the team. And I had played the Warren golf course, which was very new at the time. It's Notre Dame's home course. Core Crenshaw, like early Core Crenshaw, has all the foundation and the bones of kind of the exceptional Core Crenshaw designs. And it gets better every year. And I had played really well during the visit that I took. Just everything felt right about it. And we were heading to the airport, and coach was like, look, I hadn't planned on doing this. I'm recruiting other players, but I want you to come here. And I hope that you'll sign this offer before you even get on the plane. And it was just a no-brainer. Like, I didn't have to consult anyone. I didn't have to, call my mom or my dad. I just, on the spot, I knew it was the right decision.
And I mean, I love the campus too. Once you visited the campus,
exactly. The campus sells itself. It's so unique. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. So
on Saturdays, do you still root for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish?
Despite our depressing, horrific loss to Northern Illinois, which still stings.
I don't understand how that even happens.
It still rings deep in my bones, and I think pretty much every ND fans. Yes, I certainly cheer for them every weekend.
Well, that's great. Yeah, no, I definitely understand the people. Notre Dame is definitely a place where either you hate them or love them. I'm also a Dallas Cowboys fan, and it goes hand in hand with each other. So you have to just support them. And it's been a long 20 plus years for really both schools as far as the success goes. That's what we do as fans. You just root for them and hope they do well.
That's true.
That's really cool. Did you enjoy your time up there in South Bend?
It was spectacular. We had the best group of guys. We're all still close. We had players who were very talented, and we always said we had a lot of potential, but never measured up to it. But we had a great time. And again, just a bunch of guys that are bonded for life. So that was probably the greatest byproduct of going there, was just that I have adopted family.
That's what college is all about, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Making those friends that you can always just talk to. Did any of your teammates ever go play professionally? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But I had one teammate who played professionally for a little bit. And his name was Cole Isbin, very good player, was a honorable mention All-American, and he just really loved the high-level AM invitationals, where you're treated like royalty, where the host housing is very nice, where there's always player dining, and you're playing Marion, and you're playing Wingfoot in the best places. And then I think when he turned pro and started playing the mini tour circuit, it was a school of hard knocks, playing in podunk towns, on fairways that aren't grown in, with guys shooting 25 under, and they could absolutely give a shit that you went to Notre Dame. So it just wasn't the lifestyle for him.
They're playing in Alpena, Michigan. Is that what you're saying?
Alpena's, I think the golf courses in Alpena are probably a little bit better than a lot of the mini tour courses, to be honest. But yeah, that's the idea. Go ahead. It would be like going from Greenwich, Connecticut to Alpena, Michigan.
Well, that's a great transition. I kind of wanted to get into a little bit about, going from amateur status to turning professional. And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, you had mentioned Ryan and Monday Q. And so I don't think everybody knows exactly what that means. And so I'm just going to give a little bit of a background here. The person that we know is named Ryan, and Ryan and Mark met, and maybe you can get into the story a little bit later. Ryan is a person who covers what's called Monday qualifying. And so for a lot of the PGA Tour events, the Korn Ferry Tour events, DP World Tour, which is the Asia Tour now, I think, LPGA has them as well. They do what's called Monday qualifying. And so I know, Mark, you do a bunch of these as well. And so you sort of go around the country trying to qualify. And I think a lot of the tournaments, it's one location. I think they usually have about 4 spots for Monday qualifiers. And so basically you just go shoot low that Monday. And if you shoot low enough and you're one of the top 4 guys, you get to play on PGA Tour or the Korn Ferry Tour, etc. And it's very competitive. I mean, I think you've got to shoot a 62 or a 63 to even have a shot. I think a lot of times a 64 gets you into a playoff potentially. And usually it's about 12 guys vying for one spot. I was just sort of curious, one, maybe if you could get into a little bit about how you and Ryan met up. And then 2, I was just curious about when do you decide, or which tournaments do you decide to travel to in order to potentially try and qualify for an event? How does that process go?
Well, yeah, you nailed it when talking about the process for Mondays. And Ryan just had an inclination that because there was no one covering these qualifiers, in which a lot of Cinderella stories came from, that there would be an interest in it. And it wasn't just his nerdy interest that he wouldn't be alone in that. So he started covering Monday qualifiers and then mini tours and development series and pretty much everything under the levels of professional golf that actually get coverage. And he's built it into an actual business that has he's created a following and a niche that didn't exist before, which it's fascinating. And then on top of that, he does so much for the game and for junior players, high school players in need, helping them with equipment and access to courses. And so there's a charity has spawned off of this original idea of just covering the dark horse stories in golf, which is, it's a beautiful evolution. And I'm just happy to be a contributor to his cause. But Ryan and I met when he was kind of not first starting his account, but he was really trying to gain a greater understanding for what professional golfers went through. And so he looked around for, players that had been beat up the most by the game. And that's probably how he found me. And so we exchanged, we started exchanging DMs and eventually we met at a Q school, and then he caddied for me at a Korn Ferry event. And we bonded and just became close friends, and it's just evolved from there, where now I'm writing regularly for the MondayQ.com website, trying to help him cover stories.
Which everyone should go subscribe to, by the way.
Yes, please do.
It helps out a bunch of different junior golfers, like Mark mentioned. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's for a good cause on multiple fronts, but certainly supporting independent sports media. And it's a hard business right now to really thrive in. And we're trying to build it into something more meaningful and continue this trajectory. So yeah, please go to MondayQ.com and consider subscribing for the cost of a cup of coffee a month. What a pitch that is.
It's a great website, though. I love it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, look, you have to. That's the thing, right? That's the thing is we do a terrible job of it because neither of us are salesmen. Both of us are uncomfortable selling, and that's what you need. Is you need to be out there selling constantly. And we are so focused on the content and the story side of it that we forget that if we don't invest some sweat equity on the sales side, that fewer people will get to see our work on the other side of it. What we consider to be the most important. So he's amazing, and he's become a force in the golf media world. He's juggling multiple stories right now that are going to be fascinating, I think, to the larger golf audience and fans. But this week we got together and did a little bit of strategizing for our company going forward, but mainly we were playing golf, and I have Q School coming up the week after next. So it was a way to spend time with the great Michael Bamberger, who has insight and observational perception like no one else I've ever met, and it's always enlightening to be around him. So hopefully, just being in good company, leads me to save a shot or two at the right moments next week at Q School, which is the PGA Corn Ferry Tour qualifying tournament, and you have to go to it for those who aren't familiar, to get your tour card and actually earn a living playing golf.
Yeah, no, I was very excited. I got to meet Ryan for the first time earlier this year. He went to the Colorado Golf Expo here in Denver, and so it was a pleasure to meet him. And I just think you guys are doing some fantastic work. And I know sometimes he has to post stories about things that happen on tour, not the PGA Tour necessarily, because he usually doesn't write about the PGA Tour, but on the minor league tours. And some of the stories aren't necessarily flattering to people involved in them, but he gets to the bottom of the story, and I think his reporting is very fair when it comes to allegations of cheating or just maybe a rule might have been broken here or there. And I know he's very delicate about how he presents the information. I do really enjoy reading what he has to say about the golfing world, and you as well.
Well, look, those things he's very good at, the kind of in-depth journalism side there, but he also tells some very uplifting stories that I think are extremely important at this kind of fraught moment where, just spending any time online can lead you to exhaustion, exasperation. And like one of my favorite stories that he told was about a college player who tried to play professional golf, didn't make it, knew it wasn't for him, but just loved the game and loved getting better. Enrolled in medical school, went to medical school for a bit, and his dad surprised him by paying for an entry fee in the Rolling Rock Tour. Told him that it was going to be just a father-son trip, picked him up at school, had shirts made for him. It was his last hurrah playing professional golf. And he brought his clubs, and he brought everything that he needed for a week. And he surprised him, said, "Hey, you're going to play this tournament. Don't worry about score. Score is important. You want to go out. The end of your career, the end of your golf career should be memorable, and I want to be on the bag for it." And so he went out and he had like a career round and won the tournament and retired on a high note. And then went back to medical school. But it was just a very unique story. It was a beautiful story, and it's no one else is going to write that. No one else is going to cover it. There was never a place for it before, and I think those types of stories are important. And Ryan finds them like no one else can. He's built an incredible network of trust, people who really trust him and trust his work and his instincts.
Well, once he learns grammar, he's going to be an unstoppable force.
Well, hopefully that's where I help him out a little bit, although he doesn't ever let me proofread his tweets.
I don't think anyone's ever proofread a tweet he's ever sent out.
No, that's very fair.
It's in case you don't know, Ryan, when he tweets, usually seems to be information he gets pretty quickly, and he tries to get it out. It is always there's going to be at least one error in his tweet, whether it's spelling, grammatical, whatever it is. His sentences don't make a lot of sense. You have to sort of get through them, but once you do, the tweet's always good. But you have to sort of translate it, even though it's in English. You got to translate it just to get through it.
You got to work for it.
Exactly. He's not going to give it to you for free, Yeah. So kind of staying with the Monday qualifying thing, I was just curious to know. So I don't know. There's probably 20-ish, 25 qualifying tournaments a year. How do you choose which ones to go to? I think earlier in the year and or later in the year seems to be a bit of a softer field, at least on the PGA side, just because later in the year people are trying to just make a cut or make some money, and earlier in the year it might be like fewer people involved. Or no, I'm sorry, what did Ryan tell me? He said earlier in the year it's the opposite. That's right. Earlier in the year there's a lot of people, and as you get closer to the end it's fewer people. So what do you do to decide which tournaments you want to go play in to try and qualify for?
Well, I'll speak both on that generally and personally. And I think generally it is, where do you see yourself? Where do you think you're best? Speaking as a player, where do you see yourself as having the best chance to succeed, have a chance for upward mobility, which is kind of rare in the mini tour ranks, where if you play well, you can advance to the next level. It used to be a little more common, I would say, than it is now. So a lot of players are going to the development circuits owned by the PGA Tour, now called PGA Tour Americas, where it's 20. They move on to the second stage of Q School at the end of the year, top 10. They get some status on Korn Ferry Tour. Or you stay regionally and try to conserve expenses. And if you live in kind of a hotbed, like in the Southeast or kind of out west, where I am, you can stay a little more regionally and get a fair amount of events in to try to cut down on expenses. But then you get a much higher entry fee. So essentially, those types of events are just gambling. You're going there and you're playing for everybody's entry fees and maybe a little bit of sponsor money that gets kicked in. So everyone's priorities are a little bit different. What all players are building towards is the end of the year Q School. And look, if you're very well funded, you're going to try to go to as Mondays at qualifiers as you can. The reason being what you pointed out earlier, like if you go shoot a low score, you're on for one day or maybe 2 days. If you have to go to pre-qualifying, you're on the PGA Tour for the week, right? You live the dream for a week and test your skills against the best. And it used to be more common, I think, for there to be kind of a Monday hero every summer. Patrick Reed got his card, T. Bogle, Patrick Flayton. And I think it's becoming a little less common now just because of there's more hurdles, there's more expense, and there's just more players. You just have to shoot such a low score to be able to do it multiple times. And I wanted to say that the cut making percentage on the PGA Tour was, 20% or so for players at Monday to end, and then maybe it was 25%. But I think you also have to remember that's because of the changes at the top of the PGA Tour. And this may be I'll just generalize it because it's a little more advanced. But with all the changes due to the live competition, there were a lot more PGA Tour members playing in Monday qualifiers this year that otherwise would be in tournaments because of the signature events, which limits the field. So if you didn't get into a signature event, kind of were forced to play everything you could get into this year that wasn't a signature event, so that you could work your way into the signature events. So that route is just a lot more difficult, the Monday route, and I think it's going to become increasingly more difficult. Korn Ferry Tour Mondays now have 250 guys right across 2 golf courses. There really legitimately used to be a possibility that you could get a tour card doing that, and it's just not that realistic to believe that's a possibility now. But if players are well funded, they will include that in their schedule. And so now that brings me to my personal choices, which are I go wherever I can kind of afford to go. And so, you kind of assess where's my bankroll at this moment, and where can I get the most for my buck, and what do I have on the horizon that requires experience now? Like, how necessary is it for me to go? Because most mini tour events are, if you don't win the tournament, it's not much more than a break-even proposition, because you're paying $1,300 or $1,400 for an entry fee, and then you're paying, $500 to fly somewhere, and then another $400 or $500 for accommodation, and then a rental car. So by the time you're done, you're talking $2,500 to $2,000 to $3,000 for a mini tour. And most mini tours offer a first place check between $20,000 and $30,000. So like you're constantly making the assessments of, is it worth going? Where can I cut expenses? Can I do this reasonably? So if I go shoot 369s, I can at least break even. So that's, those are the judgments that you make throughout the course of the year. And now that it's Q school season, I think everyone is playing, every professional golfer that's going to Q school is playing as much as they possibly can now. And you just need to get as much learning and experience and competition as you can, because you just don't know what's going to click and translate into Q school for you, because that's the most important time of the year.
Can you walk us through what Q school entails as far as how do you get into it? Do you have to pre-qualify for that? What is sort of like the entry fee into Q school? And then if you were to, I don't know what the right words are, but if you make it through Q school, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, so basic overviews, it's a $5,500 entry fee. If you're starting from kind of the ground level, then you're going to 4 stages of qualifying: pre-qual, first stage, final stage. If you have played in the past and made it through first stage, then you made it in the last 2 years, I believe, you get an exemption to first stage. There's like I mentioned before, if you play the Americas Tour, there's possibilities of getting straight to second stage or final stage. And then there's added exemptions throughout the process. But for most people, they're going to first stage of Q school. They're trying to make it. It's 75 to 80 guys for 20 or so spots. And the next stage is about the same level. So the first stage is 12 or 13 sites scattered across the country. Second stage is 5 sites, a little more regional, and they're more or less all at the same time. Those fields are a little bit smaller, and they take fewer players. So, maybe 70 guys for 15 spots, 15 to 17 spots. And then final stage will be played on 2 courses this year at the TPC Sawgrass and Sawgrass Country Club. And that will be, I'm guessing it's 200 and maybe 25 guys for 5 PGA Tour cards. And then the next 40 finishers earn guaranteed starts on the Corn Ferry Tour. Everyone else gets conditional status on the Corn Ferry Tour, which more or less means you get a free membership to TPC, and that's it. So,
yeah, nowadays you can't really even go to tournaments anymore with conditional status because everybody else is taking the spots up. Just because if you're not qualified to play in one of the signature events you mentioned earlier, you're going to go play in another tournament just to keep scoring points for the FedEx Cup, right? And making money.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I'm just totally guessing on this number, Zane, but I would say there's 1,500 to 1,700 players who sign up for Q School and are scattered between kind of that first pre-qual, first and second stage entry point, and then it gets whittled down to 45 players who will walk away at the end of it happy, and everyone else will be in an uncertain professional predicament for the remainder of, or for the coming year.
And how far have you made it through that process in the past?
I've made it actually through twice. So I made it through all the stages, finished in the top 40 twice to gain my status on Corn Ferry Tour. So I played 2018, 2020, 2021 on Corn Ferry Tour.
And is that just, I mean, I know it's on the PGA Tour, but is it just fun having that sort of status on a tour, knowing you can go play tournaments and just trying to beat the other best players in the world? I don't think people understand a lot that so the Corn Ferry Tour is basically, consider it like I'm talking to the listeners here, but it's sort of like AAA baseball, where it's the best players in the world. They just haven't made it onto the PGA Tour yet officially. So the golf is incredible, but they're all trying to get to, quote unquote, the big leagues, right? So is it just an incredible experience getting to go play on the Corn Ferry Tour, knowing you got a spot and just being able to play whenever, wherever? I
mean, look, if you go from not having a place to play and not guaranteed and having a job and a series of tournaments where you can can actually make a living and you get healthcare through the PGA Tour. It's amazing to be out there, and the talent level is incredible. It's players on the Ferry Tour could step up to the PGA Tour and be very competitive. I think half the fields on any given week on the Corn Ferry Tour could contend on the PGA Tour, and it's getting better every year. So you have a lot of work in front of you once you get that card, but you know that you have a job for the year, and that's like the basic requirement for actually playing professional golf, is that you can make a living and you can move up the ladder and you can improve. So all those things you get to experience all of those possibilities on the Corn Ferry Tour. And if you win 3 times throughout the course of the season, like this is what you're holding out hope for, you get an advance. You get
a tour card.
That season. If you finish in the top 30 on the points list, you get a PGA Tour card. You got to play your ass off to do it, right? But it's an ecstatic feeling. I mean, the 2 times I made it through were they were the most joyful moments of my life. I mean, I'm right up there with, not at this level, but certainly I would say they were the most joyful athletic accomplishments of my life.
And I think what Ryan does a really good job of is he'll post videos of players like you and other people who get their tour card from the Corn Ferry Tour or who get through Q School, and they're calling their wives or their dad or whoever it is, and they just are so emotional because I have a job now. I've spent all this time doing something, and I'm actually going to get paid, hopefully if I play well enough, to do something that most people would love to do for a living, but it's damn near impossible to do it.
And you've just survived the most grueling tournament in the world, and it really beats the hell out of you, and it's nerve-wracking and it's exhausting, and you don't sleep much, especially when you're on the cut lines, and you're talking about the difference between, again, having a job or wondering whether you should continue to play, and whether it's worthwhile to wait for another year for a Q School opportunity. And so all that emotion comes out. It's in a cathartic way once Q School ends and the cards are awarded, and you see, some really vulnerable players just being honest with their emotions and letting it pour out of them. And I think it's fabulous. I mean, there's very few places where you can replicate those feelings. Of course, there's more players that walk away disheartened and broken and feeling terribly rejected. And I've been on that side of it more than I've been on the other side. And when you sign up, that's a real possibility. But it's triumphant when you actually break through on the proper side of the cut.
Yeah, I've never done anything that I'm proud of athletically, so I couldn't even begin to imagine what that feeling must be like.
You're young. There's still time.
I'm not. I'm almost your age, buddy.
Exactly. You're young. You're a young man.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to ask you. You brought it up a little bit, but what do you think separates? And it may not be an easy answer. It may be multiple thoughts on it. But what do you think separates the Corn Ferry guys, or even like the mini league guys, from the PGA Tour? Is there like one thing you could sort of break it down into? I always thought it was maybe like the mental side, just of being put together for 4 days in a row and, hitting the shots that you want to hit successfully for 4 days. Is it mental, or what do you think like the switch is that can get you from Corn Ferry to PGA?
I think conditions on the PGA Tour are a little bit different, and they're just penalized rough. If you short side yourself, you have to manage your game so much more carefully than you do on the Corn Ferry Tour. So I think players just manage their games better. Michael Vanberger said today, someone asked me the golf swing and the golf game and other player, and he said he knew his golf swing and his golf game better than any other player. And I think that's where you really see it, that there's a little more maturity on the PGA Tour. There's players just know their games so intimately and maybe they just question their belonging a little bit less. But yes, is it mental? Yes. Is it physical? No, not usually. It's better short gaming. It's knowing where to miss. It's minimizing misses. There are fewer big misses out of necessity.
Knowing where you can miss, is a big thing, I bet.
I think players are just better managers of the golf course at that, and better managers of their own game at that point. And it's so subtle, and you're talking about on any given shot, you're just, you're saving something that's almost imperceptible, but adds up over the course of 4 days.
Got it.
And so if you went and played with the 75th ranked Korn Ferry Tour player and the 75th ranked PGA Tour player, these guys are the same, but put them on a hard golf course with penalizing conditions, with a little pressure over the course of 4 days, and you're going to see it in the scores.
Because like for me, for example, I'm like a 7 or an 8 handicap, depending on how often I got there and play, which isn't good, but it's also, I'm better than a lot of people that I play with. I'm better than probably the average, guy who goes out, the weekend warrior type person. If I got a $160 and I've got my 7-iron out, it could go 10 yards left, 10 yards right, 10 yards long, 40 yards short. I have no idea. But like for you, that I hit a draw with this club more often than not. So if I'm going to miss, it's going to be a little bit left, And the guys on the PGA Tour know that I'm going to hit this ball exactly this amount of yards, and it's going to be right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just interesting to me how you guys can do that and just figure it out, where I'm just like, well, it's going to go about that far. I'm not sure which direction it's going to go, but I'll be close enough, I guess. And then I'll chip on and I'll 3-putt and make my double bogey and go to the next hole.
Yeah, right. And this is very true. I think that at a certain level, you don't see players hitting 2 bad shots in a row. You don't see the best players just don't hit 2 bad shots in a row. They hit bad shots. They hit shots where they make you go, this is really one of the best players in the world. How can that possibly be? You won't see him hit that shot consecutively with another bad one. They'll follow up a bad one with their best one.
It's also the recovery shots that just make me go insane when I'm watching on TV. So I do watch, some of the Korn Ferry. I watch the LPGA Tour, but I don't have, all the time in the world to just watch golf every day all the time. So I do have to watch mostly the PGA Tour. But those guys will hit a drive, 30 yards into the woods. And for me, I'm just like, okay, well, I need to find an opening to get out back to the fairway. And those guys are looking over trees, through trees. They're 190 yards out from the green, and they're like, yeah, I got this shot in my bag. Where I would have no chance to even get it close to the green from there. And I can't fathom how you or they do that. It's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, there's some deadly assassins out there with a ball and a club.
It's unbelievable. But no, I wanted, and I know I don't want to take up all of your time today. I appreciate you jumping on with us. It's kind of interesting to sort of pick your brain a little bit. But you mentioned earlier about PGA Tour and Korn Ferry Tour. And so I know I sort of discovered you back in 2022 when you were playing the Barracuda. And I know Ryan caddied for you in that tournament. And so I was just kind of wondering, I've got 2 questions. I'll ask them one at a time so we don't lose focus on what I'm asking. How's the difference between the Korn Ferry and the PGA Tour as far as what you get as a player on each tour? Because I know you get a car on the PGA Tour. You don't get lodging or anything, I don't believe, but you get a car, the conditions. What's the difference between the Korn Ferry and PGA as far as just the experience of a tournament? How does that look?
I think in terms of amenities, if you want to talk that, you're talking exceptional player dining. You're talking that for most events, there's a courtesy car on the PGA Tour. They don't have hosts. They do have host housing, but you don't or host hotels. but you're paying for it, and they're typically very expensive. And the same thing on Corn Ferry, but most players are kind of finding their own lodging, rooming together, splitting houses, things like that. I just think that you get kind of all of the bells and whistles in terms of being treated exceptionally on the PGA Tour, and then you get a lot more fans, right? That's something that's noticeable.
Sure.
There's more grandstands. There's more activity. There's more action, especially on weekends.
Is that more nerve-wracking?
Oh, well, it's more fun. I love it. I think it's the greatest thing ever, and I think most players that want to do it do. You know, you might be a little nervous at first, but it's really fun. And I actually think most players would say that to be followed by, let's say, 15 people or 50 people would be more nerve-wracking than being followed by 1,000, because at a certain point, everyone just kind of blends together. And there's like a consistent murmur, whereas when there's fewer people, you notice everyone, you hear everything that's said, and it all kind of stands out.
Sure.
So I think that's probably true, but when you are followed by 1,000, there's just so much more energy, and it's a lot of fun. The Corn Ferry Tour is a great tour, and they really try to stimulate the PGA Tour experience to the extent that they can. They're obviously playing in smaller markets. They're not going to get the fan experience. They have no reason to put out grandstands most weeks, but they do around like the last hole usually, and you get that feeling of it being an important event. Beyond you know that, right, intuitively, because you're playing for a really nice first place prize, and the fact that if you finish near the top, you're on course to get into the next level.
Right.
Now, I think the other thing is that the staff is much bigger up on the PGA Tour. It seems like once you qualify for an event, there's a lot more events. There's concerts, and there's player events, and there's pro-ams, and there are pro-ams on Corn Ferry. But it's just the scope and the scale is just much bigger.
Do you think when the AMs get their player and they read Mark Baldwin, they're like, who the fuck is Mark Baldwin?
I absolutely think that no one has ever gotten Mark Baldwin or Pro-Am and been like, this is the guy. This is exactly what I signed up for. But
and then you hit the first drive and they're like, holy shit, who is this guy?
Well, look, I know that, when AMs sign up for Pro-Ams, they're hoping to get a player that they've heard of. And
right.
If they get me, I try to go the extra mile to give everybody some advice and some help and tell, a funny story or anecdote that'll stay with them. And I just try to go kind of the extra mile on the whole experience because, they didn't get Patrick Cantlay or they didn't get Scotty Scheffler or Jordan Spieth or whoever they were hoping for.
And I hope you take my comments sort of tongue in cheek. Of course I'm kidding about that, but you aren't Scotty Scheffler either.
There's truth in good comedy.
But no, that's awesome. I think that's really cool. I had a former boss that one of our vendors, which probably wasn't even legally, he wasn't able to do, but they got him a Pro-Am invite to the Byron Nelson. This has got to be 10 years ago. And he played with Matt Kuchar. And so my boss invited me to go walk. He knew I was a big golf fan. And so he let me walk inside the ropes behind them on Wednesday during the Pro-Am, just watching him up close. Because you get a respect for the players when you watch them on TV. And I've been to several events as well. And you're close enough, but getting to be inside the ropes and walking behind them, Matt Kuchar, I know there's some stuff that is out there about him that kind of some people don't like. There's the caddy story, I think, from like Mexico or whatever, but he's the nicest guy that it's just fun. And then it seems like he doesn't even care about golf. And then he gets a club in his hand and then he just hits a shot. And you're like, how do you even do that? Like, I've got to have my entire focus on this one shot. But no, it's fun to be like in that group, walking behind them watching them play the Pro-Am and just see how nice the golfers are to the people who have paid thousands of dollars to play it. And so I kind of wanted to ask you, my second question from earlier was, so the Barracuda 2022, you get a sponsor's exemption. Can you explain what that is and then how you got it? And then why you don't get to play it every year? Because that pisses me off.
Yeah, I know. I think I should get it every year. I should have just gotten the lifetime exemption into that event after.
It's the fifth major.
It's the fifth major. But in 2021, Ryan French caddied for me. He is Mr. of Mondays, covers the qualifiers, but in this instance, he was on the bag. We had this amazing qualifying experience, won in a playoff after the player I was playing against missed a 1.5 footer. Rory McIlroy commented on the miss, and then it became, just blew up into this whole thing. And then I played great, and I made the cut and made a nice run on Saturday and early Sunday, and didn't end up getting in contention, but was right there heading into Sunday. And then because we generated so much online engagement for the tournament, and the tournament director became a friend, he was kind enough to extend an invite to us the following year. And again, made the cut. I think I finished similarly to where I did the year before, maybe not quite as high. And because there was, so much of the hype from the first year was because of the Monday qualifier that we made it through, what happened to successfully advance. You
tied for 50th, if you want to know.
There wasn't quite the buzz around it. But it was fun, and so that was it. Essentially, any tournament has a couple of sponsor exemptions they can give, and they give them out based on what they think is best for their tournament. And usually that's to generate more ticket sales, or because a major tournament sponsor wants a particular player in the event.
It's like Tony Romo gets exemptions into events in Dallas sometimes, which doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah, he did, and hopefully those days are behind us. But there's every tournament director has to make their own judgment call, and I think there's plenty of argument for pushing back against many of the players who have received sponsor invites. It's a very hard process. I think most, like Mark Hubbard, who made maybe like 21 out of 22 cuts last year, hasn't received a sponsor exemption in his entire career, which is insane. But that's just how competitive it is. And so, you got to get lucky and just have all the stars kind of aligned for it to happen. But that was a really special week and opportunity.
No, it was really fun. And like I said, that's sort of, I think, the first time that I got introduced to you was through Ryan tweeting kind of through it all. And it was just sort of fun to see somebody I had not heard of before who's just chasing a dream, trying to make it, getting an exemption. And it seems like, you made the cut. It was fun. And you also got to play in the Pebble Beach tournament too, I think. Maybe even that same year, I think it was, that's I know it's not the best tournament for people to watch anymore. I think it used to be like maybe more fun, at least for like television audiences. And I know the golf course sometimes takes some heat because it's not always the best. I think for amateurs like me, it's one of the golf courses that we all have on our, top 10 want to play list, just because it's Pebble Beach. And we all want to go hit that shot on number 7, that par 3.
Sure. Sure. I can't sing that place praises highly enough. That Ryan said after we played there, it was like a simulation, and it really is. It's if you've never been there, it's worth going.
Because you met, is it Steve Young? You met?
Yeah,
or
Steve
who
Young
was
was
it?
my partner. Steve Young was my partner that week. Yep.
And you guys are, you guys have talked and stuff after the tournament as well, right?
Yeah, we've stayed in touch. He's just a salt of the earth human being. He's just one of the most genuine, sincere, fabulous people. Man's just full of love, and he is just a stick guy, and very, very lucky that he still replies to my text.
Is he the most famous person in your phone?
He's not.
Oh, who is? I gotta
arguably
know. I gotta know. Who's the most famous person that's saved in your phone right now?
The most famous person is probably Ryan French.
No, come on.
No, he's the most famous. He probably has. No, he doesn't have the most followers. No, I have been lucky to have struck up a relationship with one of the greatest golfers of all time, Phil Mickelson.
Oh, and that's right.
He would most definitely take the award for the most famous person in my phone.
I talked to Ryan I'm not sure if it was just him or it was both of you, but you guys were both out at his place, I think, a few months ago. He taught Ryan how to actually hit a chip for the first time in his life, which was good for him.
He did. He reinvigorated Ryan's hopes to get better and optimism, love for the game, all of that. Ryan really came away from that weekend thinking that he was going to win this Alpena City Open. And this is my final plug for MondayQ.com. We have the final episode of the Road to the City Open coming out very soon. So go watch
I've watched that. Yeah, it's great.
Go watch the first episode. And you'll get to see how that turns out when we drop the final one soon.
And I know you've been fortunate enough to work with Phil Mickelson as well, which is just incredible, I bet, just to hear. Because, there's a lot of videos out there of Mickelson and just sort of saying words and things that don't make a whole lot of sense to a lot of amateurs. But he sort of breaks it down in a way that you can digest what he's talking about. Not that I can ever replicate what he's saying to do, but I know you've had a chance to work with him, and it seems like it's just an incredible experience to be able to do that. So I think that's really cool. Because I think he worked with you right before Q School last year, was it?
Yeah, and I wrote about it, and if people want to hear about it, go to MondayQ.com. And
one more plug.
He just so fortunate and just the greatest surprise and most unexpected, unlikely experience for any golfer, but certainly for a lifelong journeyman grinder like myself to have Phil Mickelson take me under his wing and kind of mentor me through Q School and really beyond. Just incredibly lucky for that relationship and that experience.
Well, that's awesome. And I hope you get to keep continuing to pursue this dream that you have. I think it's just one of the really cool things. And I appreciate you giving your time up today. And I think we're going to try and get Ryan on as well. I asked you about the most famous person in your phone. I think it's got to be you and Ryan are probably the most famous persons in my phone, which isn't saying a whole lot. No offense.
You're very kind to include me in that category, and I know that you wouldn't be one of those people who, if you saw that I was assigned to your group in a pro-am, you would go, "Who the fuck is Mark Baldwin?"
I'd say, "Fuck yeah, Mark Baldwin." But no, it's I really do appreciate it, and I think it's a really cool story. I think what you and Ryan are doing is just the words escaping me right now, but I think it's just very admirable, I guess, what y'all are doing and all the work you guys do with charities and getting golf clubs and, clothes even for high schools in certain areas is just a remarkable thing. So keep on keeping on, I guess, doing that. Keep up the good work. And if you ever have a tournament in the Denver area, you need host housing, you know who to call.
All right, I'll take you up on that. I'll try to see if I can tag the second grader when he's running to the end zone.
You know what we need to do? We need to get you up for the golf expo up here next year. You and Ryan.
Okay, yeah.
And we'll have a time.
I'm in.
Sounds good. It's been a really great time, and I appreciate everything that you're doing.
Thanks, man. Thanks for the time.